House Bill 629, Delegate Novotny. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good afternoon, distinguished members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Reed Novotny, representing District 9A, covering parts of Carroll and Howard counties. Chair Kaiser and Vice Chair Washington, thank you so much for your time today, and I promise to make my portion of this short. I will start with the fact that the policy review exposed a drafting flaw that has now been corrected via an amendment today. From the Supreme Court to our great Maryland House of Delegates, decisions are made by governing bodies to enhance the communities they serve. This is done through many different governing rules, but all that I have researched have an odd number of members or a fail-safe in the event of a tie, except for our Maryland school boards. 7 counties school boards have voting members, which create this unique even gridlock problem. Anne Arundel, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Hartford, Howard, Montgomery, and Prince George's all have even voting members. The other 17 counties have elected not to give their student members voting rights. These counties also share in common the fact that they have an odd number of members on their school board, just like our House of Delegates. The intent of this bill is not to eliminate the student member of the board's right to cast a vote in the 7 counties who have authorized it, only to clean up the unintended consequence of adding additional gridlock by creating a fail-safe in the event of a tie. That is it. As amended, the bill is 51 words and the intent is simple and the bill is simple. I would urge you to move favorably on this bill and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have for me. Thank you for your time.
Delegate Novotny, I do have 2 questions.
Yes, ma'am.
If you've clarified that this bill is only to get rid of the voting rights of the student member when there is a tie, in effect, that means then that the voting members vote why not just eliminate it altogether?
Yes, ma'am. Great question.
That seems to be what you're doing here.
No, ma'am, not at all. So for example, PG County has 14 members. So there's actually 15 permutations of votes that can happen. The student member in PG County would be able to vote 93% of the time. They would only not have their vote counted if there was a direct 7-7 tie. So all of our counties, except for Anne Arundel, limit what the student member can do, as you know. This is only changing that one.
Are you saying, could they break a tie?
They can't make a tie.
They can't make it, but I'm asking, could they break the tie?
Yes, ma'am. And the way it's written, it would not be a tie. It would not be a 7-7, 4-4, and the like. They would be part of the majority.
I just want to clarify. If an adult member is absent and it's otherwise 7-7, you're not against the student member breaking the tie.
I am not against that at all. If the quorum allows it, the whole point of this bill is to get rid of the gridlock, not necessarily get rid of the student member's vote.
Okay, and then my next question, you mentioned the 7 jurisdictions that have the odd number where the student, you're arguing that the student makes the tie when one could argue that it's any of the members that make the tie. Have you spoken to any of those 7 jurisdictions about their desire on this bill?
I have off the record, and they did not want to share their personal opinions on, it wasn't an official inquiry, if we put it that way. And you were correct.
So officially none of those 7 counties have asked for this, is that correct?
Members of the community have asked me to come forward with this bill, yes, but not the school boards themselves.
My members from all seven jurisdictions have?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. I sense that this is a problem maybe drawing from one of the 2 counties you might represent, or one county, and I'm just trying to understand why you are taking this effort in terms of local control from the other jurisdictions that have advocated on behalf of their own student member, even knowing that they had an odd number beforehand.
Is that a question at the end?
It is. I'm asking why you're looking at those 7 jurisdictions with odd numbers who have wanted student members, and why you're trying to undo that without asking them if they wanted that as well.
Ma'am, only to get rid of the gridlock that it's created. And I know there are many examples in Howard County specifically, And there are other times in which there is a tie vote. And it's just a good government piece of legislation, in my opinion.
I understand. I'm just saying there's many jurisdictions that have made this determination on their own. Next question we have is Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Novotny, do you know the makeup of the State Board of Education?
I am not familiar. Go ahead.
Okay, well, it has a student member that votes. It also has, in a similar way to the way student members are often elected, a teacher that is elected from among the teachers in the state. That model exists because those are stakeholder groups. And so wondering if when you say that the student creates the tie, I would argue that all the people who voted on both sides created the tie. And I'm curious why the students' vote counts less. It would be akin to us doing this in the legislature. We have a tie on a vote in committee, and we take the most junior member of the committee and say, well, your vote created the tie. We don't think that you're quite ready to vote. Is that what you're shooting? Is that generally what your opinion is here?
Absolutely not. If you had a better idea of how to not have a gridlock, it's been suggested to me that maybe the school superintendent could be the tiebreaker.
I don't think you're answering my question. I'm not talking about gridlock. I'm asking you how you're treating the students' vote. Do you think of it as a lesser vote than the other votes because that's the one that created the tie?
So I was going to answer the question.
Okay, thank you.
I do not believe that they have a lesser vote based on the fact that certain counties have given them the right to vote. For example, our county and Howard County gives them the right to vote. They also limit their right. So only one county, we actually have 96% of our counties in all of Maryland have limited the student member vote. So have the 96% of the counties out there done something irrational, illogical? Only one county allows them to vote on every single issue. This is just a slight change. And I would be open for any other suggestions on how we get not to have a gridlock of 4-4 also.
All right, thank you. Next question, Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Novotny, with this bill, let me just have full disclosure. I'm a former member and chair of a Charles County Board of Education. And so when looking at the legislation, and I know that statewide you're proposing, we encourage students to participate and to vote so that their voices are heard. I know that many of the students are concerned about your vote. And so on their behalf, why do you feel the bill is justified in what I view as nullifying their vote and their opinions? Because we want their opinions in making decisions about their education and their facilities. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I really do appreciate that question. So for example, in most counties, they elect the student member from students as old as 11 to about 18, which is about 12% of our body of Maryland, right? Of the population of Maryland, about 12%. 75% of our voting members are able to vote. So all the members of the residents of Maryland who are over that age. Those 75% of Marylanders who are over the age of 18 who can vote in school board elections do not have the ability to vote for that student member. So my retort and my question back is, when that student member has no ability to be either reelected, like all the student board school board members, how do the 75% of Marylanders have a redress on that affected or that politically elected or elected member of the student board?
Was that a question for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Because
we don't, Delegate Patterson,
okay.
No one
Thank you.
gets to ask us the questions, you know that. But we could say to Mr. Novotny again, Delegate Novotny, that again, the school boards these jurisdictions have made these decisions already. And that, yes, student members have been reelected. So please check the record on that. Delegate Guyton, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Novotny. Welcome to the General Assembly. I also have full disclosure. I served on the Maryland State Board of Education with a a student member, and of that group, I don't know if you're aware, all of the members are appointed well, until this past year where we started electing teachers, except for that actual student board of the on the Board of Education. My question to you is whether you have actually worked with a student member of a board, because I have always found them to be incredibly thoughtful and helpful in our deliberations. I do hope you stick around, because the next hearing you're going to hear from several of the student members of our boards of education.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for the question. I actually do not know, and this is a good point, I do not know our, say, Howard County's student member, because this is not an attack on the student member. This is, why would we set up an institution with an even amount with no fail-safe to get past that gridlock? That's it. Never met them before. I don't know who they are. I don't have a personal vendetta against them. I just know that 4 + 4 = gridlock, in my opinion.
Delegate Novotny, does your Board of Education have a meeting with your delegation every year before session starts? I know maybe you're new, if somebody else could answer that question.
We do, Madam
The
Chair.
answer is yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. 'cause
Howard
that's
County Board of
definitely-
Education does.
Because that's a meeting we have every year. And again, ever since we first gave our SMOB voting rights back in 1979 and expanded it over since that time, never have they come back to ask us for legislation to deal with that. And so that is 42 years of history since our first student member on the board. So Delegate Feldmark with a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Delegate Novotny. And you mentioned you haven't had a chance to get to know our student member. I would encourage you to. He's phenomenal. I think that would be a good idea. I just want to follow up and clarify my understanding. I believe you've said your intent here is not to devalue the student voice on the board, but simply to clear up what you're referring to as gridlock, the potential for a tie. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So would you be open to clearing up that potential for a tie by adding a second voting student member?
Ma'am, I would be open to discussing that, not only with the local delegation, but all of the delegations. I, again, have no issue, and I've said in public testimony, I actually was the junior mayor of my town when I was 17. And I love that ability. Was not necessarily a voting member, but I value their input, and I don't have a problem with their input. I think that would solve this problem also.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Novotny, I got to tell you, before I came to the House of Delegates, I spent very little time thinking anything about boards of education and how they operated. I think I sued a board of education once in a tort case, and that's the only thing I thought about them before I ever came here. But one thing that has been interesting to me in my 7 years on this committee is this wide, divergent way that every county seems to do, almost every county. There seems to be 4, 5, 6 different models of electeds, appointeds, hybrids, student voting, non-voting. And so I just want to confirm, I think Madam Chair may have said it, I caught it hopefully on the Zoom, you may have said it, in the vast majority of counties, at least, the larger counties seem to all have this voting member, many of them do. But the vast majority of jurisdictions, boards of education in the state, they don't allow the student member to vote on anything. Is that right?
Correct. 17.
Okay.
Do not.
And then every other county, maybe I'm getting this wrong, every other county except for Howard,
No, except for Anne Arundel.
okay, they allow, that has a voting member, restricts their voting rights in some ways. They don't let them vote on some issues or some types of resolution,
Negative personnel actions.
personnel actions. Is there budgetary actions as well? There's some
Sometimes, yeah. Depends.
counties, they
county
don't let them vote on the actual budget.
County by county. Yes, you're correct, sir.
So would it be fair to say that your legislation sort of fits within what all of those other counties do, in the sense that you're not removing the student, you're not removing their ability to vote, you're just restricting it in certain limited circumstances? Is that fair?
You're exactly right. It actually only will really change one member, one person in Anne Arundel to have them a little different, their ability to vote. The rest, the 6 other, change them a little bit, and the 17 other counties don't have a voting right at all at this point, so it doesn't change them at all.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
To follow Delegate Buckles' questioning, it sounds like he was suggesting that given that 6 of the 7 locals that give voting rights have some kind of limit, so this is just another limit. Who created those limits for those 6 counties?
I'm sorry, ma'am. It is all local. It is all by the county. Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
each county made their own limitations. Okay, I was just trying to clarify from Delegate Buckles' question.
Yes, ma'am. You're right.
Delegate Shoemaker?
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Novotny, Maryland's a little bit schizophrenic in what it allows young folks to do. I mean, we just heard from the last bill that now you can't even smoke a cigarette legally in the state of Maryland until you're 21 years old. And yet some jurisdictions entrust the student members of the board to vote on policies and in some cases even budgetary decisions that affect, thousands of students. But your bill doesn't, as Delegate Buckle alluded to, I think in his questioning, it doesn't divest any member of a board of their voting privileges to the extent they have them, right?
Correct.
Okay, and all you're saying is in an isolated incident where there's a tie, the student member of the board's vote wouldn't be counted in that one particular instance, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Delegate Eversole?
Madam Chair. So we have a little false equivalence going here. We're talking about what they may vote on or how a certain kind of a vote is out on any issue. So I don't think we're talking about the same thing, but I have a logistic question. Baltimore County, for example, has 12 members, and we're talking about breaking a log jam, but actually the bylaws say that you have to have a constitutional majority, and that would be 7 of 12. If you're unwilling to count this vote, wouldn't that be 7 of 11 then suddenly in that situation if a tie appears?
That was actually the flaw that was found during bill drafting, and it actually changes that denominator and the numerator. So I believe it would fall in line with all the counties.
This is an amendment you're offering?
Yes, it was actually drafted up and hopefully distributed. I got a copy, I know, beforehand, but maybe it was only like an hour ago, so I apologize.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Delegate Novotny? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the those people who are signed up to testify. We have 2 proponents, 1 favorable with amendment, and then 15 opponents. So I think we've taken a lot of time asking questions of Delegate Novotny. If we can move forward. Next, we have Drake Smith to testify. Is Mr. Smith here? Well, let's next have Lisa Feinberg, who I did see here earlier.
Thank you very much. I am Lisa Feinberg, and I'm testifying in support of HB 629. Thank you very much, all of you, for your great public service and for hearing my testimony today. I'm a longtime resident of Howard County, and my background as pertains to today's bill is that I have spent many hours volunteering in the public schools, especially in the capacity of PTA president at the elementary level, middle school level, and 4 years as PTSA president at the high school level. I also have served as campaign manager for a successful Board of Education race. So I do understand the system. More importantly, 2 former student members of the Board of Education are from my neighborhood. I'm good friends with their family. I watched them grow up, and I watched them serve on the Howard County Board of Education as the student members. So last night, I called both student members and had lengthy conversations with them. Both former student members expressed very similar thoughts and opinions on this bill. I must say they are not in support of this bill, to be honest. They felt that their vote was equal in weight to the adult school board members, although perhaps recorded last in the voting process. And they remarked that they did not consider themselves, quote, the deciding vote. So this goes back to what Delegate Ebersol, I think, is alluding to. I recognize that there are positives and negatives to both supporting or not supporting this bill. And I want to thank you very much for taking my testimony today. And I'm very thankful for our excellent legislative system, and that I and other people have the opportunity to weigh in and have a small part of this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Is Drake Smith here? Trying one more time.
Chairwoman, I just spoke to Drake. He is my student representative. This is Delegate Jones. I apologize. He's having trouble logging in, but he's trying to. Could we potentially go to the next?
Of course. All right.
Thank you. We'll work it out.
Okay. Ms. Feinberg was the only one who signed up favorable other than Drake Smith. So we'll take questions and then go to the favorable with amendment. Any questions for Ms. Feinberg? All right. Thank you so much. We'll next go to Tracy Spiegel, signed up favorable with amendment.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi. Good afternoon, and thank you very kindly for your time. My name is Tracy Spiegel. I'm a Maryland business owner and a proud parent of 2 Howard County students. I am in support of Mr. Novotny's bill, particularly relative to the word gridlock. I have been watching, because it's my county, I've been watching Howard County's Board of Education meetings very closely since September, obviously due to the pandemic. And I have been very surprised, because I've served on different boards, that almost every meeting between September through November has had 4-4 gridlock votes. And no matter where you fall on a particular issue, the fact that the board has an even number of members seemed questionable to me in a functioning governing body. As I further started watching them, I noticed that there is a student member. I'm in full support of a student member. I was part of my public schools governing body. I hope my kids one day want to be a student member. But the 7 adults, so for Howard County, there's 8 members. The 7 adults are elected by adult registered voters in the state of Maryland. And as stated here earlier, the student is elected by 11-year-olds through 17-year-olds. So I do question the weight, whether the votes should carry the same weight. But I more posit the question if a minor should have a vote of equal weight on major issues. You all talked about restrictions, and our county clearly restricts budget, personnel, and redistricting for the student member. And it feels common sense to me that the reopening plans for schools should fall under those restrictions. But again, that's getting into the larger issue of what are we restricting by county? The 8 board member is really questionable to me. So I hope this assembly of very wonderful, dedicated people can come up with either restrictions or legislation to amend this. I had a mathematician friend who works at NSA do the math for me. And when there are 8 voting members for any motion, 33% of motions can pass. When there are 7 members, 50% can pass. So I feel like Mr. Novotny's bill of mentioning gridlock very much hits the nail on the head, that motions are unable to pass and gridlock is causing problems, particularly during this pandemic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Spiegel? All right, thank you. Drake Smith, is Drake in yet? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm here.
Drake, and are you signed to, you're signed up in favor of the bill?
No, I don't know what happened. I signed up and it said, the slots were filled, Zoom glitches, but I am not in favor of the bill.
Well, we're gonna have to save you to the end here because of the others who've signed up unfavorable. So please wait until we get to it. There is a block on the number of people who can testify on a certain side. So let's see how many people are here already. We'll start next with Mr. Jesse Harris.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I do apologize that I'm in the car. But hello, thank you, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee for this opportunity to testify. My name is Jesse Harris Jr., a current high school senior, Chief of Staff for the Maryland Association of Student Councils, and a member of the Maryland Youth Advisory Council. Thank you all for providing me this opportunity to testify. House Bill 629 is a direct attack on the student voice, plain and simple. At a time where student input is arguably more valuable than ever, this bill seeks to limit the voting powers of all student members on county boards of education. For decades, we students have been fighting for our seat at the table. Fortunately, we've had the opportunity to have our voices heard through student members on boards of education statewide. However, not all student members on boards of education have voting powers. In fact, we've been advocating to expand voting rights for student members on boards of education for decades. The bottom line is that if students do not have voting powers, our voices will The bottom line is that if students do not have voting powers, our voices will likely be ignored. Students are the largest stakeholders within the education system. However, our voices are systemically suppressed by those in power. This bill aims to disenfranchise student members on boards of education in situations in which they would be the tie-breaking vote. This bill is stating that the student voice should essentially be overlooked when voting on matters in which there's a tie between adult board members. This is what I believe to be Delegate Novanti's first bill. The first bill he's introducing as a delegate in the House is a direct attack on the student voice. In the middle of a pandemic, during a time in which we, the students, are overwhelmed with virtual learning, mental health and wellness, the loss in our families, and more, the delegate is attacking our already limited voice. Additionally, it's 3:45 on a Friday. We have school and so many other commitments. Had I, as well as other student leaders, not been available today to have our voices heard, we could have easily been overlooked. Luckily, we're here and we want to make it clear that the passage of this bill would be a preemptive attack on our advocacy efforts to expand voting rights to student members on boards of education statewide. The worst of the education-related effects from the COVID-19 pandemic are yet to come. It's imperative that students' voices are being heard in rooms where decisions are being made to address these effects. I hope you all understand the value of the student voice and the importance of empowering students. I respectfully ask that you all oppose the passage of House Bill 629. Thank you all again for your time, and I yield the rest of my time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harris. Next, we have Noreen Badwi.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. My name is Noreen Badwi, and I'm here today to voice my unequivocal opposition to House Bill 629, and I believe I'm in good company. It is my understanding that the Teachers Union, Strong Schools Maryland, ACY, coalitions including the ACLU of Maryland, about a dozen other organizations oppose this bill. I've yet to hear of comparable support on the other side of this debate. Maryland is nationally regarded not just for its strong education system, but for the groundbreaking and effective inclusion of the student voice, of which research has shown has led to better education policy overall. Moreover, Maryland has led in student member board voting rights nationally for half a century. All of Maryland students are represented by a voting student member on the state level, and 3 and 4 out of Maryland's total students are represented by a voting student member on the local level, regardless of the amount of counties that have voting rights. So 3 and 4 of Maryland students have a local student member of the board. This bill in that regard would strip nearly 700,000 students of the sole advocate they have on their local school board that knows exactly what it's like to walk in their shoes, leaving student member voting rights meaningless and their positions essentially powerless. We all see the writing on the wall with this bill, and this is more than just a gridlock. This bill is taking a 50-year practice, abolishing it because of a short-term problem related to politics in individual counties, and in my view, it is indeed an attack on students. If it wasn't, then why single out the student member? Usually folks will argue that students should not be able to vote because of their age, and not only is it unavailing, it is insulting to suggest that on the basis of age alone or their disposition as a student, that they are thereby inept to be able to make informed decisions, research policies before the board, and take votes in the best interest of the students they represent and of the taxpayers and residents of their respective jurisdictions. It is my view that this gridlock issue is a red herring. Not too long ago, I had to cast these types of votes as well. I was appointed by the governor and served as a student member of the Maryland State Board of Education during ESSA implementation, the Kirwan Commission, and what everyone regarded was the state education session. I served on the state board when the pandemic started. I even voted on a $7 billion education budget before I turned 17. And to this day, I guarantee you that being above the legal age to buy a lottery ticket has no bearing on your ability to make an informed vote, be a strong advocate, and be a good board member. Students are the largest stakeholder in education, the most important stakeholder in education, and simultaneously the most marginalized. To strip the students of the sole board member they have that walks the same halls they do, and the only board member with a direct and comprehensive understanding of the true reality of Maryland schools would be a disservice to the state. I urge this committee to pass an unfavorable report of this bill, instead focus efforts on issues of educational equity during the pandemic, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions the committee has. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Bodway. And maybe you know this, but 20 years ago, the student member on the Board of Education in Baltimore County was a young John Olszewski Jr.
Yes, 2000 to 2001. We have a lot of really great former student members of the board. So they've
All right.
done all different things.
Next person to testify is Anthony Arend.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Anthony Arend, and I am a professor at Georgetown University and chair of the Department of Government, but I obviously speak in my personal capacity. I was the first voting student member on the Anne Arundel County Board of Education in 1975 and 76. The bill that set up that position was a bipartisan bill introduced by delegates Mike Wagner and Bob Neal, who is still around in state government. The purpose of that bill was to create a unique voice in the educational process. Students see a part of education that no other member sees. They see education at its best, at its worst. They see the realities of education in the classroom every day behind a desk. When I testified before Governor Marvin Mandel, one thing I noted was that student members on the board are not student representatives. That's what we have student government for. Rather, they are there because of this unique insight, because of this unique voice. Student members, like all members of the board, must represent all stakeholders in the county or as appropriate in the state. I oppose this legislation for a couple of reasons. The first was, and I was about to say, it lacks a clear legal standard. Now, my understanding from what Delegate Novotny just mentioned is that it has been amended. And so needless to say, I haven't seen the amended version of the bill, but I would still wonder if it has an operational legislative standard that could actually be implemented. But the more important reason that I oppose the bill is this. It seeks to limit the student voice. And this is a voice which makes for sound educational policy. I know not that just in what I have seen over these past 45 years, but in personal experience of having been on the Anne Arundel County Board of Education. I would be happy to answer any questions either about my service on the board or about this legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Arend. We next have Ian Hurd.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. My name is Ian Hurd, and I serve as the chairman for the Maryland Youth Advisory Council. I also serve as the student member on the Charles County Board of Education. Before I begin my remarks, I also wanted to thank my delegate, Delegate Patterson, for her service to education and support of students. The Maryland Youth Advisory Council stands in strong opposition to House Bill 629. The Maryland Youth Advisory Council, established in 2008 to advocate for youth legislative priorities, has seen time and time again the value and expertise student members bring to their boards. It's not a coincidence that the Maryland Youth Advisory Council often has student members who serve on it. Maryland student members are extremely dedicated and involved in public policy throughout the state. The Maryland Youth Advisory Council has seen many instances where student members provide unique policymaking insight to craft the results of careful deliberation to not just fit the vision of an adult board, but the needs of a student population. Stripping the state's student members of their deciding vote would turn an incredible hallmark of Maryland's democratic institutions into a vote of vanity. Students have a voice and opinion on every issue, but it's the responsibility of our democratic institutions to honor that voice. Maryland honors the voices of our students, and today you have the opportunity to affirm that honor. The Maryland Youth Advisory Council respectfully urges an unfavorable report on House Bill 629. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. We just had 4 people testify. Before I turn to the next page, and again to members, we have another dozen or so people testifying. Are there any questions from the 4 people who just testified? All right, thank you all very much. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you especially to Mr. Aaron for having the first student board member. I always like having the first one from my own county, but even better, first one in the state. Next, we have signed up Jonathan DePietro.
I'd like to start off by thanking Chair Kaiser and then Howard County delegates Ebersol and Feldmark for their line of questioning at the beginning of this discussion. It was absolutely the questions that we as students have been asking for a while now. Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee, my name is Jonathan DePietro. I am a current high school senior and chair of the Legislative Affairs Committee of the Howard County Association of Student Councils. Today, I'm providing testimony in opposition to House Bill 629. Throughout their tenure, the student members have served with dignity to discharge their responsibilities. Along with being a full-time board member, they must concurrently balance academics and manage personal and extracurricular activities. Maryland schools are exponentially growing, and with changing dynamics in education, student representation is even more critical. Students are the motivation behind all educational decisions, and their voices must be taken seriously throughout the policymaking process. As such, the student member of the board or other equivalent must be able to provide input from the voice of students and have a binding vote to ensure the school system continues to be responsive to students' needs and opinions. The student member vote solidifies the board's responsibility to act in the students' interest, those who are most directly affected by board decisions. House Bill 629 was drafted as a response to a single contentious matter in a single local jurisdiction. If passed, the bill will shred the only form of representation students have and will inevitably result in a chilling effect on students' voices. Regardless of the issue at hand, if student members' vote only counts when they agree with the majority of the adult board members, by this logic, their vote on the board is wholly discarded. This bill takes away the sole vote that reflects the climate of student opinion and entirely undermines the student members' role and responsibility, entirely demeans the voice of students they represent, and is a pure assault on Maryland's democratic institutions. At a course when civic engagement and listening to the youth is more important than at any point in our nation's history, this bill denies real influence for students and discourages engagement in the part of our state and local government that most impacts their day-to-day lives, their school system. An elected representative without a vote on critical issues cannot effectively represent their constituents. This bill is not an attack on the voting privileges of the student members. It is an attack on the voice of the over 800,000 students of Maryland. For these reasons, I urge the committee to issue an unfavorable report to House Bill 629. Thank you, and I respectfully yield back.
Thank you. We next have Driti Vadlakanda. Sorry if I haven't pronounced your name correctly.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and distinguished members of the committee for inviting me to testify before you today. My name is Dhriti Vadlakanda. As a finalist for the Maryland student member on the Board of Education position, as well as a Howard County student, I am especially concerned about the present challenge against the voting rights of our student members. The student members' voting rights have always been symbolic of the power of student voice. The right to vote enables student members to serve as strong and unyielding supports to our students, to guarantee them that they have a definite stake in their education, and to simply say, I got your back on this. House Bill 629 serves a crushing blow to not only our student members, but also to the thousands of students that they represent. Your vote counts, as long as most of the adults are already voting in one particular way. Your vote counts, as long as your say doesn't become problematic for us. You matter until you don't. Why pin the gridlock? Why pin the tie on the student member? The student voice is not inferior to any other stakeholder's voice in our education. The largest stakeholder, in fact, is the student. Without the student, there is no education system. With the knowledge that our student members cannot have a deciding vote on education matters that concern us every day, we students feel less motivated to be actively involved in our education. As a potential student member representing all Maryland students, I want to be able to guarantee my constituents that their concerns will be represented, will be respected, and will not be taken lightly due to a potential gridlock. We must assure the future of our nation that we're doing all that we can to support them in their educational journeys. We must empower the role of student voice in our schools. We must support the student member on the Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take the next person signed up, Sophia Rashkovan.
Yep, that's me. Hi, Kaiser, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. I'm testifying today in opposition of House Bill 629. My name is Sonia Rashkovan. I'm a sophomore, but more importantly, I'm a student activist and leader in Montgomery County, and I'm a proud member of MASC. I moved to the US in 7th grade, and one of my first vivid memories was when my homeroom teacher showed us an announcement video from Matt Post, MCPS SMOB at the time. I was blown away by the fact that a student who walks the same MCPS hallways as I do was on the Board of Education. Now, there are 3 reasons it's absolutely unacceptable to prohibit the vote of a student member of County Board of Education from being the deciding vote on any matter. Important to note, this bill specifically targets student voice, student participation, and student member of boards of education. First, SMOBs are essential for promoting civic engagement. At the same end of 7th grade, I was for the first time voted in SMOB elections. That was the first time in my life when I had a chance to vote for an elected member to represent me. SMOB elections introduced me to the whole concept of voting. And when researching candidates, Ananya Tadikonda's promotion video introduced me to MCR and MASC, which I'm heavily involved with now. Student representation on the Board of Education promotes student activism and civic engagement by showing that we actually have power to influence our education. And I hope that delegates don't want to promote that our rights as voters, putting faith into an elected member, can be limited just because adults don't want our voices to be deciding. Next, they know the ins and outs of their school district from their own experience as students. SMOBs are not only elected officials, but also fellow students of mine. They walk the same hallway, study the same curricula, and see the same problems as I do at my school. While late at night, they vote at the board meetings. Next morning, they wake up, put their school uniforms or sweatpants on, and they actually are affected immediately by what they have decided last time. Student opinion is absolutely crucial since students are the biggest stakeholders of any school system. By allowing SMOBs vote to count only when it's convenient to the adults, you're questioning the voices of all students in your counties. Lastly, and most importantly, me being on campaign teams or just voting is the way to voice the needs of students at my school and my friends across the county. SMOBs are not just individuals, they're the representation of the whole student body in their county. Even by considering to take away the partial voting rights, being the deciding vote as it stated in HB 629, you're not just taking voting rights from an individual, but questioning the voices of all students across Maryland. This bill is a sheer violation of student ability to civically engage and works to undermine decades' way for progress to empower students of voices of young leaders. I urge you to oppose bills House Bill 629. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. And we'll take one more person before another round of questions. Chris Ladard.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Christopher Ladard. I'm a current high school senior and president of the Howard County Association of Student Councils, as well as a resident of District 9. Today, I am providing testimony in opposition to House Bill 629. The vote, and therefore the voice, of the student member of the board position must be protected at all costs. Commonly abbreviated as the SMOB, the historical significance of a competent student leader elected through fair, democratic processes to directly influence policy cannot be lost in modern political quarrels. The bill in question serves to do just that. Moreover, it represents a rejection of an essential precedent that student participation over time is expanded and validated, not retracted and dismissed. As I'm sure many members of the committee are aware, not being able to cast a deciding vote on any board matters effectively means that the student member has no vote at all. They would only be able to have a voice in measures that would pass or fail anyway, rendering their opinion useless. In effect, the students would be silenced. As a longtime education advocate, I developed close connections with several SMOBs over the years in Howard County and across the state. We have fought hand in hand to expand student voice, create a just and equitable learning environment for everybody, and ensure that the business of every school system is student-centric. Any claims that these students are unequipped to handle the responsibilities of the position are ill-founded and neglect the shocking competence of my peers. Many of them are more knowledgeable on the pressing challenges in our education system than voting adults, and their expertise is often comparable to that of other board members that come from a variety of professional backgrounds. The SMOB is the only board member that experiences the day-to-day operations of the school system, making the SMOB a trustee for the will of the student body. They must weigh a variety of factors, not just raw student opinion, when formulating complex solutions for complex challenges. Without a meaningful student vote, a board of education is not politically beholden to creating a quality experience for students. They would be politically beholden to creating a quality experience for parents. And while those parents are by and large the financiers of the school system, suffice it to say, the public education system is not built around the advancement of parents. We're never going to fully agree on how our elected officials vote. But pinning the blame of decisive votes on student board members and attempting to strip away their voting powers is purely an assault on democracy. Despite the partisan and divisive nature of modern day politics, the solution to an unsatisfactory vote or even legislative gridlock is almost never the removal of an institution in its entirety. We must protect the right of student board members to vote on behalf of students in Maryland and across the country. For these reasons, I urge the committee to issue an unfavorable report on House Bill 629. Thank you for your time and attention.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ladard. Any questions for these four people who have just spoken? All right, thank you. 1 second, let me, the next person, Talu Wanimi Dapo Adeyemo.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee for this opportunity to testify before the committee. My name is Toluwanimi Dapo Adeyemo. I'm a student leader from Charles County and one of the state legislative affairs coordinators of the Maryland Association of Student Councils, and I oppose this bill. The opinions of Maryland students are invaluable when voting on legislation that pertains to them. To nullify the votes of student leaders on these kinds of bills is nothing short of counterintuitive. I believe this bill is not only a disservice to the students of Maryland, but blatant censorship of an indispensable demographic of Maryland citizens. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
I'd like to invite up the next person to testify, Oliver Song.
Hello, everyone. My name is Oliver Song, and I am a student at a local high school in Howard County. I am here to testify against the County Boards of Education student member voting bill. The school system is what raises the nation's children, what educates them on the basics of democracy, what should be filled with fun and joy. Instead, this bill is trying to restrict the only thing that gives us representation. What is democracy if the constituents do not have a voice in it? The single vote on the board is what represents all of the county's students. Democracy gives everyone a voice, regardless of age. If this vote is removed, even if it's in a case to prevent gridlocks, then it would shut out thousands of students across Maryland from having a say in their own education. It is also hypocritical to learn about democracy in government class, yet have reduced representation on the board. I can bet people are only concerned about this issue as the student member voted away they did not like. It is more important to work together in this tumultuous time than throw blame around as if it were a beanbag. There is a reason why there is a student member. Students should have a say regarding policies that directly impact them. There is no need for other people to put their hands in and turn the pot. If students truly cared about the issue at hand, they would organize and push for that specific policy. There is again no need for others to be involved. We should consider our children and our future children, how they would think knowing that someone is trying to restrict the only thing that gives them a voice. The parents may be concerned that not enough students care about the specific topic they care about. They may also be worried about the gridlock situation, and that is understandable. But why is the student member the first vote that is cut out when it's a gridlock? Why? Is it because it's viewed as the least important? For the sake of our democracy, please vote against this bill. More student members would solve the issue that parents are concerned about, and that doesn't require this bill to be passed. This fail-safe is intent on restricting student voices. For these reasons and more, I urge a negative report on House Bill 0629. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you. The next person we have signed up is Jason Wu. Is Jason here? I didn't see you on the list. Okay, seems like I was muted. Jason Wu, are you here? All right, I don't see you. And Delegate Rose, you keep missing every time I put the baby on camera. You missed it like 2 minutes ago. Next we have Carmeli Leal.
Hello, can you all hear me okay? Perfect. Good afternoon to Chair Kaiser and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee. I thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Carmeli Leal, a senior at Eastern Technical High School in Baltimore County, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Maryland Association of Student Councils as the president in opposition of House Bill 629. Our organization, affiliated with the Maryland State Department of Education, represents student councils from across our great state. This bill works against specifically the student members of county boards of education that serve as necessary, informed student voices. Since the position's genesis within Maryland in the mid-1970s with Dr. Arend, as we saw, has illuminated the collective student voice for nearly 50 years now. One of the most important ways in which that is done is through the vote of these integral members. Through my roles in student leadership and representation, I've had the privilege of interacting with and witnessing the work that the student members do for our local school systems each and every day. They manage their responsibility as high school students and their positions on their respective boards with the utmost eloquence. And there are few deeds that are a greater disservice to the students of Maryland than to restrict the voting rights of these students in any way. In fact, as you all know, students are exactly who the education systems are made for and who county boards of education are elected or appointed to serve. It is only common sense to include them within the decisions about themselves in all cases, especially in times such as these where our generation is the only one that can relay what it's really like to obtain a Maryland public school education during a 21st century global pandemic. As we know, many board members and legislators have not been in school for many years and for some, several decades. Student representation is proven to be paramount to a successful education system and is how students embody good citizenship and maintain involvement in the institutions that directly impact them, their education, and subsequently their futures. In fact, here in the state of Maryland, we mandate civic education in our public schools. The Code of Maryland Regulations states the following under the requirements for social studies instructional programs. Students shall inquire with particular emphasis on civic reasoning in order to become informed, responsible citizens, engage in the political process, and contribute to society. It would be hypocritical for the state to legally require the aforementioned standards while simultaneously punishing students for acting on the democratic values that they were taught. The students of Maryland will not and cannot stand for this hypocrisy. Therefore, we unequivocally oppose this bill and we respectfully request that you do the same. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I've since learned that Jason Wu is not able to be here, so we won't go back to him. Are there any questions for the last three folks who have spoken? All right, seeing none, I will go to the last page And there's just 3 names here. We'll start with Michelle Hall.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Hall, and I'm here today testifying on behalf of the Maryland Coalition to Reform School Discipline, which includes the ACLU, the Office of the Public Defender, the Public Justice Center, along with nearly 20 other organizations and individuals in opposition to House Bill 629, which seeks to stifle student voice and limit across the state the voting rights of student members of our county boards of education. Maryland has long been a leader in supporting student voice and civic engagement in shaping school policies on the local and statewide levels. Our General Assembly has repeatedly affirmed and expanded student voice through bipartisan support. Yet now, this reactionary bill seeks to roll back student voice and engagement, perhaps when it is most needed. Schools are for our students, and it is hypocritical to sideline student voice and agency on issues that directly impact them. It is shameful that this bill undermines student leaders' abilities to develop their own voices and advocate for themselves and their constituent peers. Whether on issues related to school discipline and policing, virtual learning, extended school years, or the many other issues that come before the Board of Education, we must remember that students are at the core. To remove them from the discussion would be a failure. I am proud and I have been so impressed by the many student leaders, past and present, who use their valuable voices to oppose this bill, and I urge all committee members to follow their lead. Thank you.
Thank you. We next have Lauren Raskin.
Good afternoon, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. My name is Lauren Raskin, a student of Montgomery County, resident of District 14, and finalist in this year's Maryland State SMOB election. I speak before you today in unequivocal opposition to House Bill 629, which seeks to significantly diminish the voting rights of student members of the Board of Education across the state. The principle to which this bill stands upon actively promotes the ideology that the voices of students are lesser so than the voices of their adult counterparts, that the concerns and opinions of both the student member of the board and the thousands to which they represent hold inferior standing to those who are not even directly affected. For you see, it is us students who walk the halls of our schools, not the adult members of the board. It is us students who sit in the classrooms, not the adult members of the board. And it is us students who would suffer the repercussions of potentially wrongfully made decisions made by adult members of the board, should our voices be overshadowed and unheard. The attempted nullification of our education system's largest stakeholders, the students, is an egregious proposition, and one that must be immediately disregarded by the committee for the current and future prosperity of our education system. I believe that every single individual in this hearing today is in agreement that we have an ethical obligation to strive to create the most optimal learning environment and education system possible for our students. But it is with utmost confidence that I say achievement of the education system to which our students deserve, is only possible through the insulation and appreciation of their voices. Quite frankly, it is my opinion that this bill is one of the most tangible threats to the success of our academic institutions and works to undermine decades worth of progress made to amplify the voices of our state's most invaluable population. It is for this reason that I implore the committee to not only oppose this bill, but actively strive to achieve the opposite of what it seeks, empowerment of the student voice rather than diminishment. Thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. We last have Ms. Tina Dove.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm sheepish to follow all of these young people. They are amazing. I'm here for the record, Tina Dove, representing the Maryland State Education Association. We oppose HB 629 because we believe that civic engagement and individual agency are critical components of a healthy, functioning democracy. As a high school government teacher, I was responsible for teaching my students all about their government, how it was formed, the theories upon which our unique form of democracy is based, the historical struggles throughout US history to ensure that our democracy lived up to the principles contained in our Constitution and laws, and their individual responsibilities to hold our government accountable so that it lives out the words of our guiding documents. One of the most important lessons I taught my students was that our government is not a they, it's an us. that our democracy only works to the extent that we are all engaged with it. I was clearly successful, at least in one case. One of my students went on to become a duly elected current member of the Maryland House of Delegates. Seeing her use her voice in the service of our state and her constituents is one of the reasons why I became a teacher. This bill is not about me, and it's not about my former student. It's about the young people who testified here today. It's about denying their agency, their legitimacy of their thoughts and their voices, and their responsibility to participate in their democracy at the local level. Silencing our student members of the board when their vote runs afoul of the interests of the adults around them is abhorrent on its face. It is detrimental to our democracy writ large, and it directly contradicts all that their government teachers instill in them. Paul Robeson, a famous African-American activist, athlete, and artist, once said, "The answer to injustice is not to silence the critic, but to end the injustice." For those who support efforts to deprive our student members of the Board of Education a voice when it breaks a tie, I would suggest that a better way to influence the vote of your student member is to speak with them directly and make your case as to why you believe they should support your cause. Robbing them of their voice and their agency because they disagree with your perspective is antithetical to the basic democratic principles that we teach. If you're unsure about how these democratic principles work or what they are, feel free to reach out to me. As a government teacher, it'll be my pleasure to teach them to you. MSEA asked for an unfavorable report on HB 629. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Drake Smith from Anne Arundel County to be able to speak.
Thank you, Chair Kaiser. I really do appreciate that. We're all still learning the Zoom platform. Good afternoon, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and the honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Drake Smith. I'm a senior at Meade High School in the IB Diploma Program and the student member of the Anne Arundel County Board of Education, the current student member, not to be confused with the first student member. I'm here to read a letter that was signed by 16 of the current SMOBs from around the state of Maryland, and it goes, "Dear honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee, we, the students of Maryland's Boards of Education, are opposed to House Bill 629, and it is with great disappointment that we even have to submit this testimony. Our commitment to student voice and advocacy led us to run for our positions, but House Bill 629 seeks to erode those very tenets. Most student board members in Maryland have a limited amount of issues they can vote on regardless. Further limiting that ability to put votes in, to vote puts the student member at the bottommost level of legitimacy on the board, therefore diminishing the student opinion to the least measure of importance. By nullifying the vote of the student board member in the event of a tie, the vote of the student member will never matter. You toss aside the experiences, time, and voices of the students. You tell the students that their hopes and yearnings are subject to the convenience of those in power. We know that, like us, you take every vote with your constituents' best interest in mind. Imagine that you made a vote and then someone wants to take your right to vote away because they disagreed with the vote. How would you feel? We ask that before you take this vote, you ask yourself, is disenfranchisement acceptable? By stripping away the student members' voting rights, we're effectively delegitimizing this essential position and setting an egregious precedent for the student voice across Maryland. We're taught in school each year to become civically engaged, to know the names of our representatives, to vote in every election after we turn 18, and to be the change we want to see in the world, and so much more. So how come when we are engaged in making real change on our local boards of education, our voice is threatened? When did civic engagement exclude educational policy? The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." So we urge you all to heed the words of Dr. King and stand in opposition to this bill, because a threat to our vote is a threat to everyone's vote. And this is signed in solidarity by the student member of Allegheny County, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Calvert County, Carroll County, Charles County, Frederick County, Garrett County, Harford County, Howard County, Kent County, the Maryland State Board of Education, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Washington County. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you all very much. Delegate Jones?
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. I appreciate that. Hello, Mr. Smith. How are you? Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. And let me just say that what an impressive, diverse group of student representatives. I so appreciate this testimony today. So impressive. Mr. Smith, you have been a pivotal, critical representative on our board, and I am so appreciative and glad to work with you. What are some, like, just an example of the last, like, couple things you've worked on as a board member, just issues, the last 3 things you've worked on?
Thank you for your question, Delegate Jones. It's always a pleasure. I think the most recent one was student mental health. I'm sure we've all seen through this virtual learning environment that students just aren't engaged and they're truly having a hard time. And now counselors, teachers, principals can't really interact with students like they would do in the normal environment, right? Say, hey, how are you doing? Pull them aside somewhere and say, hey, you're looking a little sad today, or you just don't look like your cheerful sight, right? If I have my camera off, you can't really tell how I'm doing mentally. So I advocated for a student wellness survey. It would be the first one this year that we offered to students just to gauge how they're really doing in this virtual environment, because grades only really tell one half of the story, right? You can have an A+ student who's just really struggling with the isolation. And we want to make sure that, we know how our students are truly feeling. And we just got the results, and those results will be used by our mental health experts in Anne Arundel County Public Schools to come up with new programming to really help contact students are really, not struggling during this time.
Sorry about that.
Well, thank you so very much. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your testimony. Thank you so much, Chairwoman.
All right, thank you. Seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Novotny, for bringing us a very long bill today, a long bill hearing, that is. We will still welcome you back in the future with open arms.
Thank you, Madam
Everyone
Chair.
who testified today on both sides of the issue,